Oh, where'd Josh
go? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Catch Up Court TV. This is what we do all day. We catch up with legal cases, and I have two of the greatest guests with me. Coming in today. Other than Hot, we are going to be discussing the P. Diddy trial, which has just ended with a guilty verdict. I have a lot of questions in regards to the RICO, in regards to sex trafficking. Do I believe that the government did a good job? I don't think so, but I want to be critiqued. I want to kind of understand where, if I was on the ball in looking through all the main aspects of this trial. So I have Joshua Schiffer, who is a trial attorney as well as a legal commentator. You may have seen him on Court TV and News Nation. Amazing person, and he's here to discuss the case with me, as well as CJ. You may have known her from the Baldoni coverage. She was really on top of that, and she's been on top of the Diddy case. And I've seen some takes that I'm like, okay, this might be a bit controversial. So let me hear from you as well. So thank you guys for joining me. How are you guys doing?
I'm fantastic. It is a gorgeous Thursday here in the deep south of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm really happy to be here. I love the variety of people I get to talk to who are interested in this kind of stuff, because this is generally what I'm really interested in. I could do lots of other things. I really like this stuff, and I'm really happy to be invited on to talk about it.
No, I'm glad that
I'm happy to be in the same show as Josh, because I'm kind of a super fan. I've seen some of his other stuff in the true crime. Like he delves into more like Brian Koberger, and he did Karen Reed as well. So I'm excited. Thank you, Heinz. I know we started off slow, and then I kind of dipped out because Josh, if you don't know, me and Heinz were reading the transcripts in the beginning.
Yeah.
And there was one time I had to be Cassie. I was doing the Cassie transcripts, and it was just, I barely got through it, huh? It was a lot. It was a lot. And so what I ended up having to do to digest the case was I would do it on the weekends instead of following it daily. Once the transcripts came out, then I would just take 2 days to digest it so that it wouldn't like drain my energy all week.
It's heavy stuff. People don't get exactly. And when you think about the emotions, if you've never been in a federal court, it's the primo thing in law. Like, if you're a trial lawyer, you're trying a case in federal court, that's as good as it gets. The courtroom's as formal as you're going to get. These are lifetime appointed judges. You are one breath away from our Constitution. And everybody is watching. You don't get a lot of choices to do this. The emotional weight of that, just being there and in that room, and then being there for weeks and weeks, talking about stuff that's never talked about in open company, that you're not normally thinking about. Super wearing, super exhausting. These guys, ladies and gentlemen, are doing this for 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day for, month and a half, 2 months. It's brutal. And it's brutal on the jurors. People don't understand how taxing being a juror is, because not only do you have to listen, and you're thinking, and you're building these weird tribal relationships with your fellow jurors, but you're not in a place that you're used to. You've got this heaviness of a duty that the state has given you. And that doesn't happen in the rest of your life very often. And then to be exposed to this kind of alleged violence and really heavy duty stuff, man. Come on. We're not going to BS around on this. This case had salacious sex and violence, unlike 99.99% of the cases out there. So I imagine those transcripts are insane.
Yeah. Like when it first started off, I personally thought, okay, how are they going to prove RICO? Because end of the day, I look at the Fed's conviction rate. It's 98%, 97, 97, 98%. They don't miss. They rarely miss. So I was thinking, if they have it on RICO, then I want to see what's going on under that bad boy umbrella, under Combs Enterprises. They must have something really bad on him. Like, what did you make of the RICO part? What did you make of that?
And they didn't. And you know, that's the head scratcher. So man, Bad Boy Entertainment, I grew up in the 90s. When I was in college is when Biggie came out. We knew all the songs, man. That was the sound of New York. After that, Rock the Vote. I'm almost 50. Puffy's been around for a long time. He has been many things, played many roles. So you figure there's got to be documents. There's got to be relationships. There's got to be all this. Where was it? In my mind, when you're talking about a organized and corrupt, criminally or intentionally criminal organization, an organization that has a criminal intent to commit crimes, sell drugs, buy counterfeit stuff, whatever it is, it's an organization. And that's when we look at successful RICOs, mostly organized crime in places like New York and Illinois. You see an organization, you see the Don, you see the lieutenants, you see the capo, you see something that looks like we're used to out of a mafia movie. We didn't see that with Diddy. And really, we didn't see that with YSL, which was the last great big world's longest criminal RICO case involving an entertainer. And Young Thug, in my opinion, they did a lot more to show a gang than they ever did to show that there was some sort of criminal Puff Daddy enterprise. Now, I will say this. They showed that Puff Daddy earned a lot of money and spent a lot of money. And he spent a lot of money buying a bunch of crazy stuff, including the professional adult sexual services of people who were pretty unabashed about, no, this is what I do. I travel for that. Yep, traveled to him, did that. Man, there's your man act right there. Like, that's the thing. And Hines, like you said, right, the Fed don't play. People, when you're talking about a Fed prosecution versus state prosecution, state police are reactive. Man, Hines and I get in a fight, we shoot each other. Cops get called. Investigate, go arrest somebody. And that ain't the Fed. The Fed goes, hey, I bet that guy's breaking the law. Let's go figure that out. And then they get all the evidence. They do all the investigate. By the time you know the Fed is after you, either you're a really criminal person that is kind of tied into what you're doing and pretty professional, or it's too late and you're getting what's known as a target letter. And that target letter, it's literally like a form letter. Hey, dear Josh, we think you're a crook. Why don't you have someone contact us, because we're coming for you. And then when you go to the Fed, I've met with the Feds and have them hand me the entire case on a zip drive the first day and go, all right, here's all the evidence. Here's all the charging documents. We can proceed with an information instead of an indictment because we all know your client's pleading guilty. That's the way the government operates, and it's ostensibly unfair. They failed in showing that Diddy ran an organization. What they showed was Diddy was a rich guy who liked to spend his money on some crazy, sexy stuff.
Sorry, go on. What did you make of
I was just going to
version?
say, I think that that's the case because a lot of people were debating on, he was found guilty on the transportation stuff, and then they did inquire about the drug distribution, so that's two. It should have been RICO, but I did want to ask Josh too about whether each transportation would each count as a predicate act, so then there would be the two. Because my thinking was, if each of them would count and you would have the two, then what the jury must have thought was that there was no enterprise, and that's why
I
there was no RICO. So I was going to ask you if you knew, does it have to be like, if it's transportation, does it have to be two different predicate acts, or would the two transportations have counted towards RICO?
I'd want to check that against both the jury form and the code. I believe if they're separate individuals, they can count as independent acts. I don't think you're allowed to double dip.
And so
But
that's
you're
why I think that
absolutely,
it wasn't an enterprise at the end, because I'm like, if it
yeah,
had been, so I think that's where the not guilty came from, that people don't understand when they're like, what about the kidnapping and the bribery? I'm like,
100%.
all of that's moot when um there's no enterprise. And it took them too long to prove the enterprise, I feel like, because everybody was like, who's in the enterprise? By the time they said it was KK and D Rock, it was too late. There would already been too many witnesses, plus all the witnesses that went up there to testify did, they said D Rock was sensitive to them. They said D Rock helped Cassie up. They said KK called up, someone's parents. Like, it wasn't co-conspirator racketeering behavior. They seemed like sweethearts, like they were trying to help them, not, you know,
I
act
will
in
say,
Turn
conspiracy with
off
Diddy.
turn off the podcast, man. You just nailed it. Like, that's totally it. And you
Thank you.
hit the ball out really with the too late when they bring in KK and D Rock, because all
Hmm.
right, if Puffy's running an organization, where's the lieutenants? Where's, like, they got some personal assistants, but they didn't do anything with those personal assistants in order to show an organization the way that I would think of an organization, or what I expect with an organization. And then they never could put it together as, this is what we do because this is the crime we're all committing together for our mutual benefit. Like, that the hanger-oners, the entourage, and the fixers, they weren't in it for themselves. They weren't in it for a group. No, man, they were doing a job for a guy.
yeah, yeah. I noticed that because I was seeing them bringing the assistant that was earning up to like 100K per year, and like
Yeah.
and his job was just to basically, if memory serves, he was to overlook some of the artists that were coming into the label, and he was the one that was cleaning up Cassie's injuries. And I personally thought, okay, he's cleaning up injuries. That's not good for Diddy.
That's
That's not
yeah,
good.
good
You're
point.
covering up. You're covering up a crime. I get that part, but at the same time, I looked at it and I was thinking, even though he's doing that, he's not forced to. That's not his role. Like, you can
And it's not
argue.
his main job to
Thank
cover up. No, I do a bunch of other stuff. Every once in a while, some of my duties might involve covering up what some people would call a crime, but that's not my job. Like, there wasn't an enforcer who was like, no, I go collect Diddy's money. There wasn't I'm the dope guy that gets all the dope for the sex party, so all these people. No, it was all, no, I work for Diddy. Diddy says jump, I jump. And
so sorry, go on.
With the injuries, real quick though, when you said the covering up of the injuries,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
felt
So
like they didn't prove it to where it was like, a RICO thing, because it was also for Cassie's benefit, because we saw two times in
absolutely,
her testimony where she was like, I'm going to a premiere, I don't want this to get out. And so for the longest time she wanted to keep up the image of her and Puffy as this couple, because it did help her to be, with him at the red carpets and things like that. So she also didn't want those, pictures of bruises or things like that. When they said the kidnapping and she had to be, in the hotel room and stuff, I felt, I don't know, when I saw her testimony and everything in the transcripts, it was like, well, sure, she frames it as she had to be in there, but it wasn't like with the R. Kelly stuff where it was like there was a bodyguard out there and was like, you can't, where they were sending notes
yeah,
you
outside of
can't
pizza
leave,
boxes. Like,
Yep.
she was also there, I felt like, because she didn't want to be seen with bruises to mess with her career, you know what I mean? Like, then they were going to start asking questions, and then especially the one with the Intercontinental in her premiere.
The
yeah,
mixed motives make the relationship really complicated. And it's why I personally like litigating domestic violence cases because the state loves to come on and paint your client as the world's worst person. It's like, okay, for every world's worst person, there's another story. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it justifies it, but you can't just go 100%. It is not a 100% black and white. No. And she had some self-serving motives that they could have, in my opinion, embraced a little bit more. But they were too worried that a jury would get really turned off by the idea of, yeah, I put up with it because he's making me famous and paying me a bunch of money and takes care of my mom and And one of the things when we get to domestic violence and intimate partner relationships that I've been exposed to in prosecutions, the state loves to believe that no one except criminals ever sees domestic violence, and that any domestic violence is dealt with by the state and the police. Really, let's get correct here. The vast majority of domestic violence is never reported by anybody. It's witnessed by families that you and I see every day. It's committed by people that live and work in our community. There's a scourge of what people call domestic violence because domestic violence is a complicated issue. What is domestic violence to one person very clearly is not to another. Then there's the golden handcuffs. Do you leave the source of all of your comfort? Can you leave? It's so complicated. Domestic violence is detailed and nuanced beyond explanation. So it makes it really hard to litigate in order to prove a crime against one of the people in that relationship. And they tried to do that with Cassie, and it just didn't work because some jurors are going to turn around and go, hold on here. He's getting the rawest, worstest, jacked up deal. And she got everything that she got.
And I think also the age of the jurors came into play too, because we talked about that on my show where they were like 40 plus. And so they're not as like informed of this new stuff that became famous with TikTok, where it's like, you know, being trauma informed, coercive control, all of that stuff. And so for them, it's just like, and especially this like 60 to 70-year-olds, like the boomers, where it's like, that was normal back then. Like it shouldn't have been normal, but back then, you know, everybody got scuffed up every once in a while and stuff. And not, you know, it wasn't okay, but they're not educated. And they tried to bring in Dr. Don Hughes, but for me, I felt like they brought in way too many people. And it complicated what the jurors were hearing, because by the time it's at the very end, it's like you forgot what Don Hughes was talking about her stuff. You know, it was like way too many people. And I know that they couldn't put Cassie at the end because she was pregnant, but I don't know if I was the prosecution, and I'm not a lawyer or nothing, I'm just like, you know, I watch a lot of legal cases, but
trust me, that's what
I would have put her at the end because I felt like she would have been more compelling at the end. And I wouldn't have even tried to bring in Jane. Also, that was another thing. It was like they try to put too much. They try to put too much.
I'll get to Jane, but I'm surprised. Yeah,
would it have been better to do just one case with Cassie?
Yeah.
You try that case in a week, and it becomes, all right, everybody, let's talk about Puffy and Cassie. This is their relationship. This is what happened. This is what got with it. Keep all this other stuff out. You definitely get a Mann Act on that one. Not because of what Cassie did, but because of the other escorts. And you may, because of what Cassie testified, been able to focus on the coercive element in the trafficking charge much more effectively. And then Fed would have gotten the mandatory 15 at least, and would have made a lot of people happy. But then we also are missing the fact that let's talk about this trial from kind of the meta. This trial only happened because it's Puffy. Only. If it was not Puffy, it would not have happened. They would not have brought this case. They would have been like, sorry, do you know how many other cases we have to try? Go try to pitch a case to the feds. They kind of get selective when they can't. They want to go after what they want to go after. Terrorists, money launderers, tech geniuses. They ain't fooling around with some domestic violence and hookers. Come on, that does not get them going necessarily.
Yeah, like so sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, so you know, you talk about the fact that the only reason this case happened is because of who he is. That makes a more discreet case much easier to prosecute if you're a Department of Justice employee. And this case really is an apology for the failure of state and local law enforcement, who failed everybody in all of these cases by not bringing them when they were ripe.
Yeah, because Anifilo brought that out, and it was quite interesting the way he brought it out on closing, because he basically said that this case, it only came about because of Cassie's filing, and the fact that it feels like the government has gone into someone's home looking for a crime, rather than somebody going from the home, going to report to the government asking for their help. So it felt targeted. That it was. I was quite impressed by that argument, because when you look at all the dominoes fall, I wanna ask this question, because it's been talked about a lot. How does the abuse that Cassie went through, and Jane as well, because there were testimony of abuse going on, etc. How could that have been used to win this case that was a RICO case and not a sexual assault or domestic violence in his heart? Like, how did the abuse actually factor into this case?
I think it was a bad focus and fulcrum that the government failed on, because the abuse was a central part of the alleged coercion that Puffy was exhibiting over these individuals. And the coercion was to keep them with him, to keep them sexually available. But again, we get into, are those the ones that are being trafficked across state lines, or it gets really murky. And when you get murky, it allows the defense to inject just questions. Remember, defense doesn't have to prove anything. It's the government's job to prove it. So it's easy for a jury to get in there with bright line rules and go, all right, here's the person that got transported across state lines for this, and that is, boom, the Manic. That's the low hanging fruit. But then when you get to these more proactive requirements of the specific coercion, you get into that testimony where there is the abuse, and then after the horrific, undeniable, inexcusable abuse, she is still present and participating in a relationship that still includes some behavior that I find very challenging. But guess what? I don't like to judge. And jurors are more cynical than ever about a government coming in and trying to judge them, because we love to think of our government as being really good at stuff until it comes to our own private lives and how the government judges our behavior. And then you get to that selective prosecution angle, where this is the only reason we're here is because he's Puffy. If this was your neighbor up the street, we're not here. No one's doing anything about this. He got prosecuted if this happened to my neighbor. Right. And jurors get pissed. They're cynical.
Yeah. I always wanted, because I've been staying up all night, all night when I'm looking up this case, like just to look at what would constitute sex trafficking. Is it different to grape, for example? Because I'm trying to, because I know like that legally you can't put the same crime, like, how do I put it? Let me start again. When I look
at the same behavior shouldn't be two different crimes. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm trying to say, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, sex trafficking is more to do with commerce of the victim rather than personal gratification. If I'm understanding that correctly, because when I look at grape, for example, that seems more to do with personal gratification than selling someone into sexual slavery, like for example, having sex with someone in exchange for them working with you. That to me is, well, from what I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that to me is what sex trafficking is. Like,
And if you go look at when you get to the jury instructions, you're going to see the definition, and you're going to see how those very questions are why jurors struggle with these kind of complicated, big, multi-party, lots of competing dynamic cases, because jurors have two fears: wrongful conviction and wrongful acquittal. In the American system, it is tradition. We'd rather let 1,000 guilty people go free than have one innocent person incarcerated. That's a legitimate fear of jurors. When a juror is being asked to make a decision that is going to put someone in punishment's immediate pathway, they want to be able to sleep at night knowing they understood what they were doing. That's really intimidating when it's in federal court, because it's all that much more complicated. Man, you saw that jury form. It's a maze. You saw how long the jury instructions originally, started at 120 pages and then got down to 68 or 70. Thank God they published them to the jury. It used to be that they just read them to them. So you go back, and it's hard for juries who aren't necessarily the most educated and sophisticated people in the world. They're just not. They're who they are. And it's hard stuff. So when the government doesn't have that really clear pathway, it's hard for them to get a conviction. And clearly the jury here stumbled when it came down to that. What was the coercion? Was it pay? Was it fame? Was it sex? Was it love? Was it a bunch of good and a bunch of bad? Was it a bunch of okay and a bunch of not okay? If it's a bunch of both, how do you put one person in prison and then the other one apparently got a pretty big payday out of this? How do I feel about that as a juror? Hey, do I know anybody in my life who had a relationship where it was like, hey, they're taking advantage of you, friend. That person wants you for this, that, and the other, and you don't see it. And your friend swears, no, man, you don't understand. It really is love. And you're like, dude, it ain't love. We all see what's going on there. And hold on, love makes people do unbelievably dumb things. Like, you want to talk about the list of stupid decisions. Love is at the end of many of them.
Yeah.
And jurors bring that home.
And I think with the testimony, it was in both of their testimonies, and especially Jane. Jane kept saying it over and over. And that's the thing with the witnesses. I know that they do meet with the prosecution, and their testimony is their testimony. But I was like, a lot of these witnesses went up there, and I'm like, it's not helping your case, because when Jane went up there and was like, I did it because I loved, like, I wanted him to love me, and I loved him, and that's why I did it. And so the coercion for me, kind of like right there, was like, okay, is doing it for love or the withholding of love? Because in some terms, or it's defined sometimes as withholding love can be coercion, because I looked it up, and
It's a
it could
part
be
of
withholding
standard domestic
anything.
violence.
And I was like, really? So it's like, if you, I learned so much through this. So if anything, the Diddy trial educated me and so many other people, because like Hines says, he was looking up sex trafficking. What are the statutes? And that's, I think, the funnest part about following these cases is, like, being educated on the laws and the
Oh,
statutes and all that stuff. It's crazy, because
and the
it does come
social
down to
science
language.
and the social science behind it. I really encourage you, look more into the various dynamics of these domestic relationships, because the same action or the same feeling can be interpreted in a legitimate, real way by different parties very differently. And one person's flirtation is the next person's abuse. There's an idea of love bombing, and it is one of those big red flags. Watch out for guys that love bomb. And it's like, hold on. The most famous movies have these glorious, grand, romantic moments that men and women have. Okay, so that's what a big pronouncement of love is. I should go imitate that, whether it's holding a boombox over your head out of her window. Man, you get shot around here. I show up at your daughter's house with a boombox these days. You can shoot me pretty much with impunity. Let
Ryan
alone
Gosling should be in prison. Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, and then your friend who's a girl goes out and she's like, yeah, the guy had rose petals all over the place and a carriage, and people would be like, okay, that's a psycho right there. Or was it the sweetest, nicest thing in the entire universe? And that's exactly how the mating ritual of humans is supposed to be, because we don't all have the same mating ritual. And some of those mating rituals could cause offense at others. Shit, you don't know where to buy dinner right now. If I'm almost 50, if I bring you out, if I say, hey, let's go out, I'd love to bring you out, pain is more challenging than ever. If a woman is above a certain age, it's one thing. If a woman is below a certain age, it's very different. And the dude is, or me, I'm screwed no matter what, because I don't know which one of those I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And they never defined coercion in the jury instructions. I just double checked right now. And so if someone didn't know that withholding love is part of coercion, then they would see it the way I saw it initially, where it was like, okay, well, how is that forced when she was doing it to kind of, and there was testimony from both sides of Cassie and Jane, where they would say if one of the other girls was doing it, or if they wanted to prove to Diddy, like, oh, I'm your girl, they would set these things up. So it wasn't always him asking for it. So once you read the transcripts of their actual testimony, um, there was a lot more tidbits in there where it was like kind of a gray area, you know?
And people know those relationships from their own lives. You ever known somebody that was dangling 2 or 3 or 4 potentials at the same time? And it's literally like watching a puppeteer. Because, you know, half the time they're running trying not to get caught, and half the time they're running talking about how they're king of the world because they're getting away with dating 4 people at the same time. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It ain't for me, but for some people, it's obviously a pretty common way that their relationships function.
Right. And the one thing I kept looking for was at least the aha moment, because I never saw, at least for the coercion part, I never saw Diddy promise something to Cassie or Jane Doe and then take it away if they didn't do something. Because at least I would think that would constitute sex trafficking, like, because you're making them do all this stuff with the escorts, and then you are then using what you basically promised them, like for example with the Jane Doe. I thought they had the evidence of, I'm paying for your house every month, because she said that was his gift. They opened
$10,000 a month.
Yeah. They opened a love contract, and I was thinking, oh my god, this guy is finished. If they just show one instance in which he's like, nope, I'm not gonna pay this month, you didn't come to the freak off, he's done. He's absolutely done. That's what I thought, but there was nothing like that. In fact, he was paying for he was continuing paying for her lawyers in the case. Sorry, go on.
which again, what you wanted to see was a very explicit quid pro quo. You wanted to see I'm going to go to freak offs because you do this for me. And let's just, they never had that. They never had that conversation. Was it implied? Oh, I think there's a lot of evidence that it was implied that if she stopped hanging around with him and did the things that he liked to do, she wouldn't get invited to those things anymore. But is that coercion? Wow, man, that's a tough
and they did a master class in the defense with the the little TV that Jane got him. They in the closing, I believe, or at some point, maybe it was crossed, but they basically insinuated, like, how were you being coerced? Like, you bought him the TV to be able to watch this stuff. Like, it was almost like they were saying, like, she was egging it on, type of thing. Like, you bought him a whole TV to have these movie nights so they did a really good job with creating this. And this is what I said on my show was, I went over reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, because everyone's like, Rico's there. I'm like, but is it there beyond a reasonable doubt? There were so many tiny little holes in each one of those RICO charges, the arson, the kidnapping, just so many little tiny holes where it's like, the prosecution had to have come correct 100%, and they didn't close up the holes. They didn't, even on the redirect, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, that didn't do nothing. You didn't cure the witness there. Like, because I felt like most of the female witnesses that went up there were impeached, especially the ones with Westmoreland and Steele. And, when they found that metadata on those pictures, like, that girl was, you're able to, you're able to throw out some, all, or none of the testimony, right?
And remember, it's not just the impact of that witness, like that witness, man, we just totally roasted you. You don't have the legitimacy and the trust that the state government wanted. It's not just that. That's diagnostic. It is symptomatic of the rest of the government's case. Hey, jury, remember, all these witnesses that they brought trying to prove this, they brought some kind of shisty folk, right? And they tried to literally trick you with witnesses. You don't get to say it like that during you can, but really, if you're a juror and you go, hold on, man, we heard from all these witnesses. Some of them were really great, but some of them, man, how'd they drag that guy in here? How'd they drag that person? What did that have to do with this? That seemed really made up and forced. And when you get so much more input, so much more testimony, the case gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And those little teeny gaps of beyond a reasonable doubt that aren't filled in, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And then you can drive a truck through the case, which is exactly what happened, because clearly there wasn't an organization.
Yeah.
There was a guy who paid a bunch of people to get some to have a really freaky life.
I also think that the video really put the pressure. I mean, I'm not sure if it put the pressure on the feds to act, because the video was outside of the statute of
the beating video, right? Not the sex video.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the beating video, 100%. And back to something that you mentioned earlier. Look at the U.S. attorney that brought this case, who is no longer a U.S. attorney. He was very known in his very brief tenure to bring high-profile trophy hunting cases.
Yeah, Damon Williams is his name.
I didn't know that.
If you wanted to look him up, Damon Williams.
Yes, he's another part of the story because this case was brought about by him. He's gone. He works for the multi-trillion-dollar, he does very well, cashing in on his work and experience. But he was known for the 3 years that he, I think, ran the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was a Biden appointee at bringing these real high-profile trophy headhunter cases, many of which he was really successful with. He was in charge of Ghislaine Maxwell. He did Alex, what's his name? He did Elizabeth Hunt. It's really good stuff. But he was known as a bit of a political headhunter. And then you look at the fact that it's Maureen Comey, who is an experienced but younger skewing U.S. attorney who had done some big stuff. But this is definitely a capstone career case. And she has a very prominent role in the Department of Justice and the legal universe at large. So there's the outside politics of this. And that video is the reason the feds brought the case, which they highlighted in the close. And over-reliance on it was a mistake because it showed a horrific beating. Didn't show him with 3 bad guys coming in to clean it up. It didn't show his enforcers next to him.
I saw they even tried to present evidence of the bribery to get the video into their position from the hotel. They tried to say that KK was the co-conspirator that was basically trying to get the video, and he offered money to the video for the video. But it turned out that the hotel were trying to extort him and not really him bribing to get the video. Just like, so I was really stunned by how
there's a hint. Just like Epstein. So I worked on the Epstein case. We represented one of the victims in our office in the U.S. Virgin Islands. My partner, Doug, did. So we were really involved in Epstein. And it's not, so everybody likes to say RICO. Is the whole nation a RICO? Because everybody's in on it when somebody super rich and famous is there. Jeffrey Epstein was doing all the stuff he was doing in plain sight. And if you've ever been to the islands on a cruise, there's lots of people there. You can go to the marina. Everybody saw them getting on and off the boats. There's no question that many people outside of this select few named by the federal government were involved in everything Diddy related, because it would be impossible otherwise. The aura of wealth and success. Remember, Mr. Combs, I believe at one point, was a billionaire when he was at kind of the peak of him. there's a flow of that money and influence and power and effect that just radiates out of people like that 24 hours a day. Everybody wants to be near it. Everybody will do something to touch it, grab their dollar from it. And that includes people like hotel security guards that go, ha, 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 I got the video. No, you ain't buying it for 100. Yeah, I'm going to hold you up for XYZ, which is a crime. And there's probably 10,000 unknown other stories that we didn't even get into in this case about how Puffy lived his life.
Yeah,
But
and
it was never an organization.
one of the things that I also thought when you were saying about Maureen Comey and all that stuff is like, why didn't they bring the little Rod stuff in? Because that civil lawsuit to me was more compelling of RICO, because you have, what allegedly happened in the studio with the guy who was shot. You had
Shot in the bathroom.
more of the. It sounded more like sex trafficking, where he said he had evidence of stuff, and I always thought, if they were really trying to take him down, why was it just limited to this, and they didn't go after that other stuff? Because I felt like they might have had a better case going with the little Rod stuff.
Absolutely valid point. And what I'll tell you is they probably did a roundtable review of the various things they knew about him and said, how are we going to charge this guy? Okay, we've got this video. What else do we have? Well, when we search his house, we find this, that, and the other. We watched all these videos and they are crazy. Look, they had to build a case. And then they totally went back into the little Rod in the bathroom stuff. They totally went back into the 90s and the studio shootings and the guns and J-Lo and all kinds of, man, Diddy's been around for a minute and he's had plenty of, scandal associated with him at different parts of his life. So they had plenty of meat to chew on. They just could or could not bring what they brought. And I'd be willing to bet the little Rod stuff either wasn't reliable, it was outside of the scope, it was far outside the statute of limitations. Remember, this case was already pretty far outside the statute of limitations for the state charges, which is why the state charges arguably weren't brought. And for all we know, there was somebody banging on the U.S. attorney's door going, hey, we can't let this guy, this celebrity, get away with beating a woman on video. Someone's got to prosecute him. The state can't. Please, somebody. And they said, well, we can kind of do this thing out in New York. And they said, all right, somebody go get him. There are people in government that hold that kind of sway and influence.
I agree with everything you said, because when I saw the statute of limitation for the RICO being for 5 years, I was like, wait a second, 2019 to now, nothing happened in 2019 that could be deemed as RICO.
And remember, there are other federal crimes people commit on a shocking base. The obstruction. Federal obstruction is one of the most powerful tools. If you know that you're in part of investigation and you provide any false material, and they kind of got you on like 5 years. And trust me, they use that as a squeeze all the time. These witnesses were as forthcoming as they were because they're dealing with a gun being pointed at their head, very often from a government agency who's like, listen, if you're not going to testify to what we believe the truth is, we're going to have to investigate and threaten you with this, that, and the other. You're not allowed to lie. It's not this just show up. The witness prep, like you were talking about, isn't this friendly, let's go have some tea. No, there are very specific policies, procedures. There are ways the government is trained in to encourage cooperation when cooperation isn't forthcoming. And it is absolutely legal for them to lie, cheat, steal, and basically extort people into appearing and testifying. That's what the government does.
Right. By the way, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I am seeing your chats. I will get to them when we get through this round of questions, because I have a lot to ask in regards to the video, and how all of this should have been legal, etc. I will get to the chat. Make sure you hit the like button as well to help us out with the YouTube algorithm. So I want to ask in regards to that video, because she was leaving a freak off. And he beat her, dragged her, But what I saw was they didn't make it back into the freak off. She was basically in the living room, and the video ended there. And she testified that they didn't actually do any freak offs that day. How comes that video didn't show, or at least, how comes that video was not enough to show coercion and being forced to perform a freak off? Like what's gone?
Because there's a bunch of other explanations. It could. That's what so many people struggle with. The government has to prove what happened beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and there was doubt planted by the defense. So with that one, okay, when you read the transcripts and if you go back to Cassie's, because I can dissect this one for you, Heinz. Okay,
Okay.
uh, when you read the transcript, Cassie says she wanted to end it early, right? Because she had a premiere, right? And so at this point, if you gather up the story from all sides, what ends up happening is that they were done with the freak off. I'm assuming that like Diddy got in the shower. They're saying that Cassie tried to take off from the freak off with his phone because there was arguments about cheating, whether it was her or him, and where the defense planted the reasonable doubt, and you really had to be paying attention.
Okay.
Was in the closing, they re-showed that video of the hotel, but instead of showing the dragging, they showed where she was coming out down the hallway and she has something in her hands, and you can see it on the reflection off of the mirror. And in that, she had a phone in her hand. And then after he, drags her, whatever, when Diddy's back in the hallway, he has that phone in his hand. So a lot of people thought, oh, it was Cassie's phone he was trying to take from her. But if that was Cassie's phone, when it was in her back pocket, she was trying to use the phone in the lobby. So if it was her phone, why wouldn't she just use her phone? Why was she trying to use the lobby phone with the phone in her back pocket? So to me, it made it believable what the defense was saying, that it was Diddy's phone and that he was trying to get it back, and that was the reason why he was dragging her back and all that stuff, and that there was no freak off after that. So it was like they planted that at the very end in closing, which was a masterclass for me because I was like, wow, there's the reasonable doubt. Could it have
And,
been that he was just trying to get his phone back, or was it that he was trying to drag? So right there, they bam.
and the defense didn't have to prove it. They just had to call attention to that possibility. And hold on, it's a possibility that the government had not addressed and didn't have a chance to address by the time they brought it up. And notice the defense didn't point at it and go, see, it's right here, it's right here. No. They mention it, they move on, and that invites a jury to ask themselves the question, hold on, what about that?
Yeah,
Because if you're arguing to a jury, if you're arguing at a jury, people don't change their mind because someone is arguing at you or explaining something to you. If you're explaining, you're losing. If you're arguing, you're losing. You have to invite that jury to make the decision themselves to go to wherever you want. And by dropping that nugget about the phone, somebody turned around and was like, oh, man, yeah, maybe that is. And then boom, just like she said, reasonable doubt, boom.
Wow. I mean, that changes everything because you can even argue it was theft on our part. I mean, I'm not saying she deserved to be in our Bible, by the way.
And what you just did is what you hope a jury does.
Yeah,
you literally just did what you, man, if we just mention this phone, some cat back there is going to be like, hey, man, maybe she stole his phone. Man, that's why you chase a girl in a towel out into the hallway all pissed off. She took your phone. And
he was cheating. And he was
they didn't have to explain it. Somebody jumped there and was like, oh, yeah, no, I could tell. We call those danger points. And the job is to identify them and snuff them out as much as possible. But obviously, it didn't happen right here.
Damn. I mean, maybe that's why they went back into the realm of just toxic relationship, because there was a lot of instances in which they were showing both of them cheating on each other and being jealous of each other. So
being a terrible lover is not illegal, though. Like cheating on people, not illegal. Doing freaky bedroom stuff, man. Most of that stuff's real legal. Like you can have all the baby oil you want. You can. There's no limit on baby oil.
And to piggyback off the domestic violence stuff, most of the domestic violence, again, it's like if you read through all the transcripts, they all happened over cheating. They never happened over arguments over freak offs or anything like that. When Jane said that they got into it, it was because she had started up the fight. He had been with some other girl or whatever. And it was either when Diddy got confronted about cheating or when he got jealous and assumed that they were cheating. So it seemed like,
Mhm.
and then also, another thing that I wanted to point out was when Cassie was asked, how did the drugs make you feel? And they
Mm.
started to name all the drugs, like Molly made me, horny, whatever, and then this drug made me angry. And then to me, that's when it clicked, like Diddy is a drug addict, because it makes sense. He's
Oh
doing all
yeah.
these drugs. The domestic violence stems from the drugs, and then the sex addiction stems from the drugs. And then every single witness that went up there for the prosecution, that they were trying to paint him as a monster in opening, yet every single one of their own witnesses at some point through their testimony said he was caring, he took care of everybody, he was
Mhm.
good-hearted,
He
making the scraps up,
tried.
there was great memories.
Yep.
And
He
so it
tried.
seemed like it was the drugs that were making him into this person, not necessarily that he was just this psychopathic monster. So that's the way I clicked it all. Because I know me
Love
and Heinz in the beginning were like,
it. Love it.
Diddy needs to go down. And
Yeah,
then by the
absolutely.
end, I personally was like, he's a drug addict and a sex addict. And it seemed like he was nice when he was sober.
I,
You almost want to pity him.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, almost.
Pers-
Almost. I'm
personally,
not saying, but like, hey, here's a kid from nothing that rocketed to success unlike anything else. He handled a lot of it really well. Guess what? He didn't handle all of it really well. I get that. I totally get having a little part of your life that's out of control. And I think a lot of other people get that too. And what was the defense pointing at? Here's the government coming in saying that your sex life is wrong.
yeah, and the one thing that I thought was masterfully done by the defense is, even if you can prove the coercion for the sex trafficking, you cannot say that Diddy lured her for that purpose, because
No.
they presented every business opportunity that Cassie was exposed to. And I think
It,
even the government own witness that was brought in to testify into Diddy's bad into Diddy's enterprise, or him being a bad boss or whatever, even though she did testify to like how he would make everyone work at at his full maximum force, etc., all those things, which I must admit is quite normal in the industry. You work stupid hours, like when
yeah.
you're working for for a record label. But my point is, even her, she was saying that Cassie was not gonna make it in the career that she had,
Yeah.
that she wasn't just mainly just someone that was just a studio recording artist, that she was never gonna be a Maria
And
Carey
let's
level.
also just be honest. If it
Mm,
was just about sex, he didn't have to import and ship people around to get sex.
yeah.
He could show up at 1,000 places. Wouldn't even need to walk in. There's a guy that goes and gets you those. Hey, who wants to go back and meet the famous Mr. Combs?
Yeah.
So it wasn't this
I think they
sexual
showed that as
thing
well. They
necessarily.
Yeah, they showed that as well with the Kim Porter, the mother of his children, with the
Of the
Kim Porter
kids,
angle.
yeah.
Yeah, because she was jealous of Kim a lot, and they were showing that he was going after other women, and so the idea that he was using Cassie to do all of these things, etc., was a bit, in my opinion, far-fetched. Even if they prove the coercion, I think the hurdle alone of even trying to show that the reason why they were that she was being recruited, because that's what they tried to argue, that she was only being given an album deal so that he can get sexual
And
favors
and
from
it,
her.
and when you think the government and its prosecution is being a little far stretched, do you think that's fair or do you think that's not fair?
That's nuts. No, no.
Yeah, yeah. And then
It
does
should.
that carry over to the rest of the prosecution and the rest of the kind of oeuvre and feeling and terroir of the Yeah, hold on. What's going on here? The federal government is ganging up on a super successful minority man about his sex. We can go way back into some deep level chair and get back to some fundamental American race issues that I've heard some really highbrow critiques on, where
especially
you
with the
knock
Mann
it down.
Act.
But
With about, there's a lot of race politics in this that the defense did a very good job staying away from until they needed to. But
I don't even think that they
did
touched
get
on
it
it.
in.
I don't think they
Barely.
did.
There were a couple.
They were not even
Couple
touching at
little
all.
asides.
They did, especially with the
Let's do.
prosecution being all white women too.
Yep.
A
All
lot
white
of people
women.
thought that's where it dropped the ball with the
Yep.
optics. And even in their closings, Agnifilio gave agency to the jury, like, this is your house, you do you. Whereas Comey was like, I don't know the tone, obviously, because I'm not there. I'm just reading it. But the way I read it in the tone at the very end, it felt like, find him guilty, like, do what I say, like, I'm telling you what to do. Whereas Agnifilio came from and people are like, oh, well, you shouldn't, the personalities of the lawyers shouldn't matter, you should follow the law. But it's like, all of it matters.
Makes a
That's why
difference.
you get lawyers.
Every
It's part of
little
the
bit of
show.
it matters. And it ain't fair. Guess what? I'm a 5'10" heavy set balding dude that looks like this. That's what I got to work with. And sometimes that's awesome. Sometimes that sucks. And you got to understand the case comes first. And they could have used some diversity on that prosecution team. I certainly would have wanted some diversity, considering some of the things the defense could have done on a pushback. You could have very honestly done a straight political defense of the case and done this is the only, doesn't matter what they're dragging in his lovers that he still loves and still pays for. And they're only you can do that. And if there's a place to do it, it's federal court. But let's do a couple of those questions. I know we're getting close to 7:00 Eastern time, which means it's probably midnight around UK time. What are the viewers wanting to know the most?
Yes. Yes, please ask this question. By the way, I want to ask this just for the purpose of trying to separate, because a lot of discourse around this has been that DV victims are not being believed, that people can go through grape essay and all those things are not being believed. Do you think that was the reason why this case was brought? It was just to get that discourse out there rather than actually go for a cover all bases strategy kind of case?
There was definitely a very strong political motivation to bring this case that involves domestic violence and whatever statement people want to believe about prominent examples of domestic violence not being prosecuted. Somewhere in the charging decision that came up. I don't know how strong it was. I don't know what the conversation within the U.S. Attorney's Office is, other than that its result. And then what they did with that result was unsuccessful. And I think it's a pretty easy and collectively agreed upon criticism. The government could not prove there was an organization. The government could prove that Sean Combs did a lot of drugs, was a pretty reprehensible person when it came to the treatment of the people he claimed to love. Probably has a drug addiction, probably has some other mental health stuff, was fantastically wealthy and not cared for by a bunch of people very well. That then a whole universe built itself around him to allow him to do some pretty awful stuff. But guess what? So some of the people, they still love him even though they did awful stuff. My brother did some awful stuff to me when we were kids. I probably threatened to kill him no less than 1,000 times. I still love him. Like, you can do awful things to each other and then move past it. Was it criminal? Man, yeah, but those crimes didn't get brought. And it's the requirement of the jury to consider what's in front of them.
Right.
So I view this case as a great moment in the discussion of domestic violence. I think that it moves the conversation forward. But really what this case means more to me was it's another example of a cynical jury rejecting high-profile trophy hunting, celebrity, and RICO. I think it says a lot about RICO.
Right. Pam, thank you so much for this question. She basically asked, do you think the jury didn't believe in the criminal enterprise. Like, I'm guessing she's trying to ask why do you think the jury didn't believe in the criminal enterprise that was being brought in front of them?
Yeah, I think that was the fundamental failing, is they never the government never sufficiently defined and established that there was an organization outside this guy named Puff Daddy who paid everybody's bills.
Yeah, I think that with that, just to add to that, is that they, we said earlier in the show that they waited too long to like identify who it was, and by the time that they did, I don't think that it resonated with the jury, because in closing, Agnifilio did a really good job of saying, how can KK be a co-conspirator when Mia was, talking about she wanted to unalive herself because they were firing her. She's like, let's call your parents, let's, I want to make sure you're okay. It's like, those aren't actions of a co-conspirator. And then he said the same thing for D-Rock. D-Rock was, sensitive to this or that. Those aren't actions of a co-conspirator. And so, you know, they didn't have enough time. And I don't believe Comey in her rebuttal said anything to like cure that for the jurors. It was just kind of brushed over. So they failed. I mean, at the very end, the prosecution failed to make the connection.
Right. Interesting question here by Carmina Padilla. Thanks for the question. She basically asked, was there a crime organization and they just backed off improving it, or was it a warning? Interesting question.
Well, I love that, because hold on, everybody watched it. You can say that every one of these high-profile cases is a shot across the bow for everybody else out there being like, don't do this. We know what you're doing. We caught one of you. That means there's 50 others. And I guarantee that there were a lot of wealthy individuals that probably were like, hey, we got to tighten up the ship. Next time we're doing this, that, and the other. Let's make some smarter choices. But there's a new group of millionaires that got born yesterday on the stock market. They're all chasing this stuff. When you get to a certain level of wealth, doors open that are closed to the rest of the world, and everything's kind of out there. Go look at yachts off of Europe and the United States and in the Caribbean. I'm not going to say you got to go into international waters for monkey knife fighting, but you can get a lot of stuff in the yacht.
Not the yacht, girl. Too deep of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they paid me that amount. You can have a real good time with a bunch of money.
Right. I do want to ask a question though, because I did think that when they tried to bring out the fact that Diddy was making videos of the free cuffs, I thought that may have been a good angle to go by on sex trafficking. But I do want to ask, if Diddy was having these free cuffs to make videos of the free cuffs for his own, enjoyment, making porn, private porn, etc., can that be classed as sex trafficking?
I don't believe so, because it's perfectly legal for consenting adults to videotape themselves doing anything. Now, when you get into the commercialization of it, the distribution, there are some different things that come up, but even that isn't necessarily criminal. It's civil. Remember, California, where a bunch of this happened, is the home of the Valley, where half the porn gets made, and you can sign waivers to do this on camera. And that makes it suddenly not a crime, which is a weird hiccup in the system, because you can have some violent adult media that looks very non-consensual, and that is the purpose of the artistic format. I think that the videoing everything was really interesting, because the state struggles with videos of prurient and potentially non-consensual sex. It is why the Pam Bondi news 2 days ago about Epstein was so big. She finally said, oh yeah, there's thousands of videos, because there are thousands of videos. They're never going to share them. They're so locked down. The list of who's on them is locked down. And God forbid that list ever gets hacked and released, some heads roll, because there's a lot of people, and you're victimizing especially the women that were involved. And that's horrifying. Same with these freak-offs. You've got people that were probably not known that were involved that didn't want to be splashed in front of a crime scene. There's lots of people that tried to extricate themselves from being brought into this case. It made some of the evidence kind of hard because what was he? And he's a perv, and he really likes videos and spending time reviewing media by himself, arguably with a large amount of baby oil and other lubricants, which
I felt
it's
I
America.
I felt like the defense used the videos really well at the very end because I learned about something called mens rea, which is like
Oh yeah,
intent,
intent.
and
Yeah.
whether he had the intent. So when they said why didn't he get for sex trafficking, I thought of mens rea because at the very end, in closing, he goes, Diddy didn't know that it was illegal to
Yeah.
do this because he had watched porn and in there people get paid and it's a performance, and so his intent was just for performance, and so it like landed like for me anyway when I was like okay,
It's
well
just
that
like the
takes away the criminal
escorts.
intent.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
felt like
not
they did really
paying
good.
her for sex. I'm paying her for time. And if she wants to throw some sex on top of that time, that's just how the world is. There's so many perspectives. And if Diddy's going, yeah, guess what? While I'm in California, I get hot people to come over and have all kinds of crazy sex. And then we record it and da-da-da-da. Man, there's a whole bunch of businesses making billions of dollars and paying taxes doing that down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess he learned his lesson. Just do it, because I was like,
You there?
I
think we lost her. Okay. I was really looking forward to hearing what she had to say. I do. There's a question asked here. It's that it was asked. Pam Intimity says Jane as a witness was key for the prosecution. Yeah, testimony left me wondering if she was forced to testify. Do you think Diddy is still paying for a mortgage? I mean, he's still paying for a lawyer. So.
I understand. He has enormous amounts of money. He is financially beyond successful. He really hit hip hop and that universe at the right time. Few people have made more. Money's important to him, but it can disappear really quick, and he doesn't have any problem spending it. And really, what are you talking about? $10,000 a month plus another $10,000 a month in spending cash, $250,000 a year. Man, he might make $250,000 in a day on some of his record. I have no clue what his revenues look like, but he owns an enormous recurring catalog of music that continuously spins off profits.
He's good.
It didn't all stop in 2001.
Money machine. He's got a money machine.
No, he makes more money like taking a nap. Like working with people of this wealth level, you realize that the money most people are concerned doesn't even exist. $50, $100, $1,000, man, don't even make me think about it. I made it while we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's how he can wander through the world being like, no, everything's paid. I don't worry about anything unless it's a boat or a house.
Right.
And he was like, hey, I need, by the way, a super hot performer to come make a movie with my girl. Someone was like, you got it.
All right. Question here despite the look on my face, you're still talking. you guys have got some creative names, I'll give you that. She asked, considering the recent trials, Diddy, YSL, Karen Reed, Brian Camp, just to name a few, are jurors becoming more savvy, or is this prosecution becoming more arrogant and underestimating them? That is a brilliant question. Like, what do you think? What do you think?
So I'm very much, and I've spoken on this, I continue to speak on this, the American jury is more cynical of government than at any time in my 25-year career. And I believe it's getting more cynical. You were talking earlier about how the Fed wins 98, 99% of cases. That's changing because the Fed went from being a long, slow plea and nobody questioned the veracity and authenticity and truthfulness of agents to, hey, you trust everything the FBI does? No. You trust everything the CIA does? No. You trust the police in your neighborhood? No. I don't need all of the jurors. I need a couple. That's how you win a criminal defense case, is by showing the establishment jurors who want to just go along with what the government tells them, hey, there's really another alternative to what the government is trying to get you to do. And you just need a couple people to stand up and go, man, I ain't buying it. I ain't buying it. And that's getting easier the more inquisitive. It's why true crime is so important to me, because we educate people about the state's not perfect. Just because the state said it and sounded real confident doesn't mean it happened. The headline is not the story. And I like that development, because I think more people deserve a chance.
I'm back, y'all. Sorry, it's raining over here, so the signal was shot. It dropped signal.
No, you're cool.
I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're
But
fine.
yeah, with the jury stuff, I feel like I just learned about jury nullification. I didn't even know that was like a thing. Where
And we're not allowed to say it.
We're not
just
allowed
gotta know
to
it's
say
there.
it. But it's there, and one of the ways that you can overcome jury nullification is by having not only a rock solid case, but connecting with the jurors. And from what I heard throughout the trial, the prosecution didn't attempt to connect with the jurors. They were constantly behind the lectern. They were not trying, like, making an effort, whereas the defense did. And there was head nodding and smiles and all kinds of stuff coming from them.
Well, and remember, Agnifilo got both angry and funny during his close, and really he elicited open smiles and laughter. That can be either amazing or the worst thing ever, but he did it and it worked. And you're right, the expectations and performances of this government and defense are different, so you can't judge them on the same scale, but you can judge them on their effectiveness. And I happen to believe that if you are going to do the staid, straightforward law and order where the government prosecution, there are better ways to do that and worse. And same with the I get to know you soft and smushy first person, everybody's first name defense. If you do that well and the jury eats out of your palm, you do that poorly and they feel like you're trying to trick them on behalf of a master criminal. And that's bad for your client.
Yeah. I do want to ask, because he was found guilty of the Mann Act, and the prosecution is going all in to try and get him. Try and get him.
An oversell. Don't tell me it's the crime of the century and he needs 20 years when he got convicted of what? Yeah.
Of an act that's designed for minors. Like when I found out that Elliot Spitzer was going to get prosecuted for this act, and they said, "Oh, we're not going to prosecute you because it's designed for minors." I was like, wait, why did they bring it for Diddy then? I don't get it. I mean, I get it for R. Kelly. Because
the Mann Act is almost always used as this weird extra, we can get you on this theory. It's very rarely the main crime. It's and you brought her across state lines while doing it and had sex with her? Perfect. We're going to throw a Mann Act on there. It's really how it is. Like, it gets used in civil cases like that, where literally you can have a civil cause of action.
And it was super open and shut, because it was the receipts of the travel were there.
Yeah.
The sex was on the tapes. So there was no way the jury could not really, other than, them just saying not guilty because of,
that would have been jury nullification.
Yeah. So I was like, that was the only one, because if you were following it, everybody, or at least people who, follow like legal stuff and all that, where they were saying the Mann Act is a shoo-in. Legally.
That was the low-hanging
fruit. Like, they proved it.
The defense didn't deny the Mann Act stuff. No one was like, no, we did not pay this guy to come over here and perform set. No, they kind of ate the bad fact.
Could they have even denied it? Like,
they didn't fight it.
Oh, God.
So, Heinz, I want to thank you so much for having me on tonight. I'd love to do this again. I want to give a special shout out to all of my ancestors' people up there in Stirling and Clackmannshire and that part of Scotland, where I will come and visit you. I somehow ended up with a bunch of Great Britain, UK, fans, and I just love it. My family goes back. My mom's maiden name is Beresford and goes back to the 1100s, and I love the genealogy. And one day, I promised myself I'm gonna come do the visit and see where we ended up before we went to Canada. And they ended up in Canada. I'm like, Canada in the 1800s sounds like a terrible cold place. But admittedly, better than the Virgin Islands, because when you go to the Virgin Islands, you see the pictures of all the redcoats that got stationed down there in 1700s wearing the wool, and they are whiter than I am. You do not want to look like this in the Caribbean, because it will murder you. The sun will murder you. And I was like, that's the worst assignment you could get in the British Navy. But that's a whole nother podcast, though.
Yeah, but no, but I appreciate you for giving us your time and
absolutely, man. I love what you're doing.
Through. Thank you. Yeah, like all I try to do is just make it like at least have someone that would teach a layman like myself, because I want to check how accurate I was in my discussing of this case throughout this week, and I really felt they could have got the sex trafficking, but going through it again, I was like, okay, I see where they fell. So anyway, I appreciate
you, Josh. I appreciate it, and
I want to thank you as well. And really, if you do a show, get my info, man. I have a very open show.
Yeah, and you do true crime, so I just did Brian Koberger, but I'm going to be doing like Morphew and a few other. The
Morphew is going to be some. We've got Adelson Gardner coming
Fernandez, up. The Stampin' Up Harris. I don't know if you know that one, and then
we've got
Larry Maletti.
Yeah, there's cases coming out of Massachusetts now. We've got the
Brian
Gilgo Beach Killer coming out. Like, there's so much true crime, and who knows what the next one that they haven't discovered yet is, because literally. The craziest case could pop up tomorrow. We're in the nation that has Florida. You never know what Florida's going to do.
Why do they always
You wake up tomorrow.
Florida,
yeah,
why is it always
Florida could have the next 6 months of programming just tomorrow, and you just never know.
Well, yeah, I'd love to have you on, and it was such a fun chat. I appreciate you so much.
I'd love that. Please reach out. It would be a great pleasure and honor. And Heinz, thank you again for the invite. Love it. So glad we could get this together. Thanks so much for working my schedule this week with these two big ones. Has been nuts, because we didn't even touch Koberger. I can talk about that all day. Two families want the death penalty. Two families don't. Let them fight it out. You people are insane.
Yeah,
like
he could have walked. Wow. Like you never know with juries. He could have actually walked with it.
Oh. Like death penalty is the most complicated thing. And here's the thing, and I gotta leave after this. Here's the thing people understand. If you're gonna do a death penalty defense, you are obligated to uncover every stone. This is someone's life in your hands. Your obligation is zealous defense. You never stop.
And I think they knew that. I think the prosecution.
Not only did they know that, not only did they know they had a very good defense attorney. You're talking about 4 hot and sexy college kids in Idaho. I know what I did in college, and that was 25 years ago. I'm sure now there's better pictures and records and emails and records of the stuff that I did that I know would have mortified the community had I been murdered and everybody went and looked through all of my emails. I don't want to know what these 4 kids who have been the sweetest kids in the world still do some real dumb stuff. And that's what I'm just telling people before they freak out on this poor DA. What if the DA is like, hey, if we're going to try this case, your kid's secret OnlyFans account comes out, background in drug dealing, prior sexual assault out. Who knows? And really, don't risk it if you're going to get life with never leaving prison ever. They wrap that cat up as tight as you can. So the pissed offness about no death penalty, nuts.
I try to help the family only because when they talked about, they at least wanted a full confession. So I did write an email to the judge that later got admonished. I later was like, am I on a list? Because you said some of these people got referred to law enforcement. But I was respectful. I just said, hey, if this plea deal is going to go through respectfully on behalf of the Gonzalez family, could you please add that, he
Yeah,
says
get a
exactly what
confession.
happened, the murder weapon, the like everything, like, can you please? And then at the end I put PS justice for Buddy, the dog that got sliced
The
up in
dog, the
Idaho.
poor dog.
Please
And,
reopen the case for Buddy.
and
So
I'll
I
tell you
did
that
do that, but I agree with you in that perspective, because you know what? I hadn't thought about the way they would have dragged those kids, and you're right.
oh, those poor kids would have been, and they would just throw allegations. It'd be awful. And it's a mandatory duty of the defense to do that. But I will say, I'm not all pro DA. He may have boned the discussion. He may have treated the Gonsalves and these other families terribly. And if so, hope that gets exposed. The DA owes an obligation to be in contact with these families. But here's the thing, they know that. And I'm willing to bet that they towed the line when it came to what they had to do, because they knew that they were under scrutiny. And they knew that the family was going to be super pissed off. Because guess what? You get pissed off when someone kills your family. You have bloodlust. You want to go kill somebody. I totally get that. Remember, there's only 3 defenses at law. It wasn't me. I didn't do it, and he needed killing. So, all right, y'all. I really got to run.
Right.
Thank you all so much. Look forward to talking to you soon. Please, if anybody wants to follow me, I'm at Lawyer Schiff on Twitter.
Make sure you follow him. Make sure you follow him.
Yeah,
Yes, make sure
I
you
don't
follow
do
him.
other
I'm gonna
social
post it
medias.
on
I'm a
my
Twitter
X.
dork. But please, yeah, at Lawyer Schiff, and you can follow me and all that other stuff. So thank y'all so much. Have an awesome one.
No
All right,
worries. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day, yeah? All right. Okay, so
Thanks, Hines. You put together a great show. Like, he was awesome. So
yeah,
awesome. I
yeah,
feel so
like
privileged that I got to come on as a guest for this.
come on, man. I know that I know how much you have paid attention to this case. Your opinions, like I missed a lot of stuff. So you were really a good person to bring the balance in, because
And
like I
that's what
said,
I want to say in the replies to some of these people who are like, the jury got it wrong. I'm like, did y'all read 50 pages, or did y'all spend 50 hours reading the transcripts?
yeah.
Like, did you watch all the like everything, or were you just reading, Inner City Press, of course, was great for like the daily stuff, but there was a lot of stuff missing. He can't, he's only one
Why?
person.
Where did you get a transcript from? Because I was looking everywhere for that. Apparently, Diddy's team made it available for everyone.
Yeah, there was a YouTube channel that was reading the transcripts. Her name is something Sylvia.
Okay.
I wish I remembered, but I'll send her to you. And
Okay.
yeah, so she had a
Yeah.
lot of them, and then just
I will.
whatever I
I
could
will.
find.
I will put it in the. I will put it in the description below so that
Hmm.
people can go watch it. But yeah. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, so no, that was it. Just that, a lot of people had this stuff, and it's like if you start to read the transcripts, you see where the holes were and stuff in the case. Like what I said, a lot of people missed in the closing how they put the stuff about the phone. A lot of people were like, "Wait, what? What about the phone? Wait, it was Diddy's phone? Like, what is all that all about?"
Mm,
Um, and so you really had to be paying attention to realize like why the jury decided what they did. And if you realize that they did the 2-man acts, that's why the first day when they came back with 2 through 5 were decided but no RICO, I was like, okay, then that means that there can't be sex trafficking and um the Mann Act, because those would automatically be 2. But then another lawyer who's I think they're Lawyered One on X, I think that's their handle, they were really really good. They always did commentary under Inner City Press,
mm,
and he's the one that pointed out that, not necessarily, because then you could have that they just didn't believe in the enterprise, and then they're still guilty for the sex trafficking and the Mann Act. So I was like, oh, there's a whole other angle. So that night I was like, oh, he might not be in the clear. They might have still got him for the counts 2 through 5 might still be guilty. But for some reason I always thought that it was going to be the 2-man acts, because that was clear as day. There was the receipts of the hotel rooms, the receipts of the bookings, like all of that was like super legit, solid, no holes.
mm,
With the sex trafficking, the holes came with the coercion, right? What was the definition of coercion? Were they coerced? Was there, which went into the credibility of the 2 witnesses. And I found it interesting that they didn't ask for any testimony from Jane. So I wonder if they dismissed Jane's testimony right away as far as the sex trafficking, because of the fact that she said, I did it because I loved him and stuff. Um, but they did ask for three really, really important parts in the Cassie one, which was the Intercontinental, FO, the cans. I always say cons, but it's cans.
Mhm.
FO, and then the conversation that he had with the flight. Remember where she alleged that he showed her the video and was like, I'll release this video if you don't do the FO. So I'm wondering what happened once they read the transcripts. And that's another thing. I want to see the verdict form too, because I wonder the way that it was played out, it was like count one, guilty or not guilty. And then I don't remember the wording, but I wonder if it said you could still move on, because I wonder if you could still see what was proven and not proven, or if they just put not guilty and then didn't fill out
Mm.
any of the rest of the stuff. Because if you remember, they asked the question about distribution. So did
Mm.
they work backwards, or
No,
like how did that work?
I personally think that the distribution angle, they were just trying to see if they could make it work with the drug predicates, um, because they and if they could make and if they could make that, if they could reconcile that with the whole enterprise. But I think they asked that and they couldn't decide on another predicate to give to the RICO, and they thought, well, we can't really give it, we can't really do it. So I personally think when they decided that sex trafficking was off the table, I think I think they just decided that after they asked for the distribution, they just decided that the sex trafficking was off the table because they were like, well, you can't prove the enterprise, etc. So that's what I think happened because they were really stuck on the RICO part. I think they thought if we can't find them guilty, if we can't find Cassie and Jane guilty of sex trafficking alone, then we can't go for the predicate. I really think that's what happened because they didn't prove arson, they didn't prove the bribery, they didn't prove the witness intimidation,
Yeah, all those had reasonable
the
doubt.
yeah
The
the
drug
kidnapping.
distribution, though, I felt was cut and dry for me. So I was a
Now
little bit like, because
now
once
they
they said the language was,
mm,
as long as you give drugs to someone, then like it didn't matter if you were buying it or whatever, or if the person asked for it. The moment you give it to them, it's distributing it. So I was like, oh, holy crap. So I was
yeah
like, you learn something new every day. Like, don't share your drugs, kids. Like, because,
yeah
the
yeah
moment you do, it's,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, that makes sense because some criminal organizations, they only hold the drugs for the drug dealers. They don't really distribute it and sell it. They just hold it so that someone else can come pick it up, and
hmm
that's it. So I think that was the main. I think that's the main idea, to go for not only the person that comes and pick up the drug, but the person that actually holds the drug for the drug dealer. So I think that's what the statute goes more into. That's the idea that I'm getting. So um, that's yeah, that's what I
it'll
think.
be interesting to
Mm,
see the jury interviews coming out, who's going to
they're not
speak,
gonna do
and
it. They're not gonna do it.
you
They're
don't
not
think
gonna do it.
so?
No, no, they're
Because
not
with
gonna do it.
Karen Reed, I thought, the Brazilian woman that came out, and like there was some very interesting characters that came out of the Karen Reed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you followed the jury
Yeah,
afterwards,
I
or
did. Oh, yeah.
yeah, and it was interesting to see how like their way of thinking and what they felt was improving. Because I felt like that was another one with reasonable doubt, where all you have to have is that tiny, and I know the chat mentioned Casey Anthony too. It's like the thing was, any tiny little doubt, that's all you need. Even if it's a tiny little seed of doubt, that's all you need for a not guilty. And with Casey Anthony, they try to say it was the father, and then they got the sympathy saying like he had essayed Casey Anthony and stuff, and all that's why she didn't speak up, and the jury believed it. There was reasonable doubt. And then the same thing with Karen Reed. It was like, how do you explain the seat, the Bayport or what, the car situation where why were the policemen there, and then the
Mm,
butt dials, and
mm,
there was a lot of stuff that couldn't be explained, because in the first one I felt like she was guilty in the beginning until the case started to go. The same thing with like the Diddy trial. It was like it- they painted it out in opening statements like he's this monster, and that's why I think they overreached too. It's like you painted him so badly, but then all your witnesses didn't, and so it was like contradicting. Whereas the opening for Diddy was the same as what they didn't even present a case.
Yeah.
They
No,
didn't even need to present a
yeah,
case, but
like I
I felt like
they
it stayed
started
more consistent.
they started off so strong. I think they done the best they could to try and consolidate it and like try and say that we're not gonna go for these predicates and try and make it as streamlined as possible. But in all fairness, it really fell apart. It really fell apart when it came to Jane Doe and trying to prove the enterprise with her. I think that's why they took
Mhm.
the sex trafficking predicate out of it, because when they put the statute of limitations for 5 years into that, like when they had to consider that, they could in no way convict Diddy based on Jane Doe's testimony, because that just never happened. The sex
Mhm.
trafficking just never happened with Jane Doe. You can argue it was stronger with Cassie. You can argue, that, and I think if it did go down to if there was no sex trafficking statute of limitations read out to them, I think they may have I think they may have done it. I really think so, because that drug, they wouldn't ask that question in regards to the distribution if they didn't find one predicate already. You know what I'm trying to say? I think,
Mhm.
yeah, that's what I think. But but this case,
I
like,
wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised with what the jury came back with, because if you had been following it and you read the jury instructions, that's another thing that Josh said. Them jury instructions were 70 pages. I read them like 2 or 3 times, and then I ran them through Chat GPT, and to explain some of the stuff that I was like that was above my head and stuff. And the jury doesn't have that option. They have to just try and interpret it as best they can. And that's why they come back with so many questions, the jury, is because some of these jury instructions, and I know that in like the Jonathan Majors case, that was a big deal, was the way that the jury instructions were written and the verdict form. And one of the things that was like mind-boggling, we didn't even talk about sentencing. We should have talked about sentencing, but
yeah.
we didn't get to that. But one of the things that I found strange in Jonathan Majors is that what he ended up getting accused of was he it was basically he hurt her unintentionally. That's like the wording of it, was that it was unintentional. It was while doing something that unintentionally hurt her. But then he got domestic violence classes as a sentence, which I thought was like really weird, because it was like he never, the domestic violence one, they found him not guilty of that, of intentionally causing her harm. So I was like, okay, if he unintentionally caused her harm, how is that still domestic violence? Like it didn't click. So I'm wondering what the sentence is going to be with this one. Where are they going to try and it it all comes down to like the sentencing packages and all that stuff, because
Mm,
there's like, I'm learning about enhancement. We're probably gonna have to do an episode on sentencing before it happens, because
yeah. No,
um
we are. I like, yeah.
they can add enhancements based on like different things, so it can like add years to it. So it's crazy the way the sentencing works.
Oh, I mean, like, yeah, no, we definitely are going to cover the sentencing hearing. So that's definitely on the calendar. It's going to happen in October. So there is a long time to wait for that. Pam Entertainment TV, thank you so much for your comment. I really like this. She says document things on X had the copy of the blank verdict forms. If the jury could not find Jane was both trafficked and transported, then the jury had to find Diddy not guilty of RICO. Yeah, Jane destroyed this case. In my opinion,
Yeah.
her testimony was just damning, like completely damning, and it just didn't help with the statute of limitations that was being read to the jury. They just went back in there and be like, okay, there's no point of us even bothering with the whole distribution angle, etc. Like, so yeah, she destroyed the case. But did I? I don't like it when people just, when this case started, I just knew in my head that there was no way that people were gonna watch this case and try to put their personal feelings to one side and just look at what is being presented to them. Because what was being presented to them was paper thin. They began, and I will always never forget the prosecution's the prosecution's argument that they began by showing how Cassie joined Bad Boy and became his girlfriend, and showing that this was the first step in making her into a sex trafficking victim. That was their genesis. So there's no way that you can now use, in my opinion, it would have been very hard to use abuse and all of that aspect to try and prove sex trafficking when she had every opportunity to elevate her career. Like, always found that tough.
And that's what
Always
we've been
found that tough.
discussing. That's what we've been discussing over on my channel with actually Pam was on. Shout out to Pam Entertainment TV. If you're not following her, she's in the comments, but she was on that show with
Mm,
Tyler Perry. I had her on with Tina from Legally Locked, and we were talking about Tyler Perry and how that guy was literally in it until his show wasn't going to get produced, and then all of a sudden it's a lawsuit and all this stuff. Like, where do you draw the line between, you know, them, like the SH and the DV and stuff, whether they stayed because it was forced or coerced or whatever, to, or where, it was because they were trying to elevate. Because I don't understand that, like the trauma part of it. Like, why would you put yourself through all that trauma
mm.
when, and I get it, more so with someone like Tyler, because he is a billionaire. But I guess with Diddy too, he did have a lot of money. But with the Cassie thing, what made me a little bit hesitant with her story is that if they're like, she's in such fear of him, but then she was doing things that were like, the Kid Cudi thing and the
Also the
the Michael
Khalid
B.
thing.
Jordan.
Yeah. And
Like,
that
if you were in such
article as
fear of
well.
someone and you were in fear that you were in a DV situation, like, would you really go behind someone's back to do that? Because wouldn't you be fearful of them? I don't know. That's the way that I was, like, the fear part never really resonated because some of her actions didn't. And I'm not informed, quote, trauma informed or whatever. So
Mm.
I'm still learning about that stuff too, like the trauma bonding, where people are like, oh, the reason why she was, essayed and then she consensually did it is because of trauma bonding and things like that. So I'm learning all these new terms myself, but I never really understood staying to, like, wait to see if you get
Yeah, but
elevated, because
yeah,
is
but
that worth the trauma?
yeah, but even despite all of that, that only goes into one element of sex trafficking. That only goes into coercion. There was never proof presented that she was doing commercial sex acts. From what I saw anyway, there was no proof of that. From like like and like
Well, because they were trying to say that the payments were the perks. That's how I saw it. That they were saying, like, she had all these perks. She was paying for the house, but then at one point she testified she was paying for her own house.
oh I mean that just ended it. But I'm if they were arguing that, yeah, she was getting the all the payments and all that, is like, then
Because
fair
at
enough.
one point
Then
they said it was
fair enough.
forced labor. At one
Yeah.
point they tried to paint it as forced labor, like it was work for them, like that was their job, because they had the text from Jane.
Mm.
And then I was like, oh, well, that might be reaching. Like, I don't think it was their job, because she said that. I mean, maybe it was, because she did have that text that said, like, do your job or whatever, but it was kind of like, do your job as a girlfriend, or like, it was really gray area for me with that stuff. Because at first I thought the forced labor was Mia, but then in the closing they were like, the forced labor was Jane and Cassie, and I was like, wait, what? Like, how was it labor? But I guess it was work.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, like, but anyway, at the end of the day, I'm glad that it was, like, at least in my opinion, we got at least an idea from someone who is actually prosecuted at that level. Well, not prosecuted, defended at that level. That the jury is in, that the makeup is very different. So, like, yeah, I still don't think this case should have happened, in my opinion. Like I followed it through, and I was always coping. I'll be honest, I was coping. Like, I went back and watched some of my takes from when
The very
Jane
first
came
show.
on. Huh?
The very first show where you're like, Diddy needs to be locked up right
No, no,
now.
no. It was no. I stand by my first 2 weeks of takes. I stand by that. But when Mia came on and Bungalan came on, and like the dangling incidents, I started the cope. I was like, no, it's still bad for Diddy. They still have this. They still have all of that. I was coping until it was just the final. It was the final week, and I was like, yeah, I can't defend the prosecution anymore. They're letting me down. Like that was
Yeah, and
why I
that's
had.
why people are like, "You're pro Diddy," and I'm like, I don't think I'm
I'm
pro
not
Diddy.
in
I'm
pro
like
Diddy,
anti
but
prosecution because the prosecution didn't do their job. If they had done their
yeah,
job, Diddy would have, gone it. Like they did not do the
like
job that they were
like
there to do.
I even made a take in remember when Jane was doing a freak off and she tried to say that she was forced to take drugs, and it was implied heavily, but there was no actual proof of the force. And that I actually said that based on what's report, that you can actually that this is actually a very strong inference of force. And I knew it wasn't force. I just knew. Because end of the day, like she wasn't asked, sorry, she wasn't made to actually take the drug that she was taking to engage in a freak off. None of them were made to
Yeah,
do
and
that.
she says it
None
in
of
her
them
own
were qualified.
testimony.
Mm,
If you read the transcript, she says it. She says, "I did it so that I could like disassociate. Like it was like her decision to do it so that she didn't have to all the way be there." But
I mean,
it's the same thing.
I
It's
was
like they just. It's. I know it's hard to speak up, and I guess it's hard when you've never experienced a situation like that, or how hard it could be, or you're dealing with someone with lots of money and possible law enforcement connections. But she was able to go to Seattle with her mom a couple times. Like I've and the biggest proof that I found that a lot of people were talking about was that um after she left in 2018, like he didn't do nothing to her because there's rumors about Diddy and Jamie Foxx and Kim Porter and all
yeah,
that stuff and
yeah,
all those rumors. So, but like Cassie is, nothing happened to her. Like
nothing,
nothing. Like
absolutely nothing.
if he
Abs-
was what she feared, it never came to fruition. So it just goes to lead. And then with Jane, even after she's testifying against him and he knows that she's on the witness list, he's still paying for her stuff. And so it was just like it was such a blurry thing for me because none of it connected the way that the prosecution like spelt it out. It was all discharged and they had way too many witnesses. Like even Josh said, "Yes, I agree there was way too many witnesses." It muddied it, and some of those witnesses were not, credible, like with the metadata and the girl that got dangled, like that could have been left off, I think, cuz I mean, what was that to prove the was it kid, I don't know, his violent nature. I don't know what was her whole testimony for that. It just
mm,
it made it seem like they put up non-credible witnesses up there, and so I feel like that damaged their case too. They should have kept it shorter
yeah,
and gone with just Cassie.
I
That's what I
I
think, because
completely.
after the
Mm,
Cassie testimony, you had all the public too behind you too. Like
yeah.
that testimony was damning, and nobody went back. I know that after Jane, I went back to see Cassie's testimony to match him up, and there was all these like kind of inconsistencies in Cassie. So no one would have ever gone back if you hadn't brought Jane.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I definitely agree with Schiff. They didn't. I mean, I can understand why you want to put on a whole case to try and prove every predicate, but they didn't. They could have, yeah, like as Joshua Schiff said, this is not a state case where you have to call every witness that was at the crime scene to come and testify, good or bad. This is not the state case. You can actually streamline your case to fit what you're bringing, which they normally do. So I was kind of surprised. I was really surprised that they even put some of the witnesses up, especially Bungalen. I was really surprised with Bungalen, knowing that there was a receipt for Diddy being at a completely different location to what she came into to testify to. I was surprised that they even put her on, all because she was the assistant and she was at least there to try and show a furtherance of the enterprise. That's what I thought she was there to try and show, but it was a complete. It really fell off the rails. It really fell off the rails. Pam Entering TV. Yes, I would definitely hit you up in regards to the sentencing, to come on. I will try and get Joshua Schiff to come on so that we can ask a lot of questions in regards to this. So yeah, so but yeah, what more is there? Like there is,
I
you know,
mean, just the sentence. I mean, not the sentences. The drop in the ball. Last thing. I mean, we still got 15 minutes if we want to do like a full 2 hour show. But it's the bail was where I like the defense dropped the ball. Like they
oh yeah.
basically put out a
Oh, I forgot
bail
to ask the question.
package.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah. I forgot to
bail,
ask the
the
question.
bail. They put together a bail package that said we would like his travel restricted, and then the word restricted did not quite match up with as many cities that were on that that bail. It was like New York, New Jersey, California, Florida, and it was like that doesn't seem restrictive at all. That
Yeah,
seems like he's
yeah.
flying all over west to east.
Right,
To
right,
me,
right.
right off the top.
That's how, like I said, when I read that bail, when I read what they were proposing, I was like, this guy actually has free cuffs lined up. He must have. He must have, because he wants to go and do more. And I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if the judge thought that, because I personally think that the judge would have accepted bail if they promised to
If he
keep
just
him,
stayed put, like I
yeah, in
put
the house.
New
I really
York,
think he would have accepted it. He would have
New
accepted it.
York down the street from the courthouse,
Yeah, yeah.
locked
I'm
down with an ankle
surprised.
monitor,
I'm really
check in,
surprised. I'm really
security
surprised.
outside the door, only my family visiting me, like a little mini prison, but out in the outside world where he could at least see his kids and stuff. Like he was doing way too much with that traveling, and it was Alexandra Shapiro who put that together. She's the appeals lawyer, and she's a pretty good lawyer and everything. But I don't know if they were just riding on the high, if they were, after working for so many hours. I have no idea what that was about with the traveling, because and then
Yeah,
all they had aside from that was drug testing, and and then it was like vague, any other conditions you want to put in, like, no, it's not up to the judge, like you need to come correct with all like the lawyered one on X said that when he does his, that he does daily schedules down to like, this is
mm.
what's when he wakes up and this is how it's gonna be.
Lawyer it up. Yeah,
He'll be
I
in
love
bed
that guy.
tucked
He's
in.
like, his takes throughout this whole case has been
Yeah, if y'all don't
A1.
follow
Like,
at lawyered one, you
yeah,
guys need to.
yeah. No, no, no. But like, in all fairness, I hate that this case has come to an end. But I'm glad it has, because end of the day, you shouldn't. No one should be prosecuted like this. I think it's not like the R. Kelly case, because the R. Kelly case, it was, when I look at the R. Kelly case and compare it to this, that case had a bit more legs. People say that R. Kelly did not have good lawyers, but I'm sorry, but they actually proved that you were using your bodyguards to get minors. You were using your bodyguards to try and give them, and say, you get to meet R. Kelly. This person, he has this for you. He has that for you. They would use that to lure them into into his homes, and then he would have sex with them. There is no way a jury is going to look at that and think that isn't sex trafficking, especially with the fact that you got to look at, even if there were no escorts and all those things, etc. A minor cannot consent.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the fact that he used his bodyguards that was working at his at his studios, etc., they were able to prove the enterprise easily, especially
Yep.
with the sex predicate, the sex trafficking predicate. They were able to prove that easily. So I'm like, what happened there that they failed here? Because yeah,
But
but
then also with that, there was they were actively recruiting girls out of crowds and stuff. So it was like it was an enterprise. So that's why it was so easy to prove. What are you
yeah,
laughing at over
absolutely.
there? Are you laughing
Absolutely.
at the
No,
freak off
no,
question? Now that we
no,
know what
no,
a
no,
freak
no.
off is.
No, I'm laughing. I'm laughing at the fact that I'm just laughing at these Diddy takes. Like some people are just they are like I laugh at brain dead activity because I'm seeing people really stretch their backsides to try and prove that Cassie went through sex trafficking, and I'm like that's not a sex trafficking victim. That's just she's a DV
Yeah,
victim,
and like
but
I
not
envision it like
yeah.
the movie Taken. Like that's how I envision sex trafficking, like
That's
where they were
because
like in the
that's
cages
what
and
it
stuff. And
is.
so maybe this is like modern sex trafficking where like you get perks and stuff like that. I don't know, but
No, no.
the
If
question
Cassie
that go ahead.
in all fairness, I really think that if Cassie didn't have her own accommodation, I think that if she was only doing things at the behest of Diddy, she could not move freely. She never had her own accommodation. That it was all paid for by Diddy, and if she didn't do something, then Diddy would take it off. I think that's sex
Yeah,
trafficking
they
right
would have
there.
had it.
Yeah, they would, yeah, because end of the day, he is making you do stuff with the the prostitutes. They don't, especially with what I looked up in regards to sex trafficking now. They don't need to have a tangible money exchange.
Hmm.
The fact that she's even making music for you, while and then you are giving her money, etc. The music part that she's making for you, etc., could be translated as
Considered. Yep.
that's the benefit that you get out of the out of the relationship, you know. So when I looked at that, I'm like, you nearly had him, you really did, but when you look at the whole, the
Picture.
yeah, the whole picture, the whole evidence, the fact that she didn't, that there wasn't an overt control of her movement or all those things, it was very hard to see her even as a
Because they
modern,
try to prove that with
yeah,
the
as
Africa
a
thing
modern
when he was
trafficker.
calling her. When he was
Huh?
calling her in Africa, that she was like monitored and controlled in Africa by calling. But it's like that just sounded like a crazy boyfriend who was like, "What are you doing out there?" And then it turned out that through testimony that she was, talking to Michael B. Jordan or whatever. But Pam asked, "How do you think Diddy will fare with all the other civil lawsuits now that we know the FOs?" And I think that a lot of people started to file. It depends on how much time he gets, I think, because I feel like, all this fear of Diddy and stuff. So I feel like the lawsuits started coming in when they thought he was going to go
Ah.
in for life. So I don't know. There was already two that I think either got pulled back or dismissed since then. Um, so I'm wondering, how that's going to go. I know one of them went through finally with like the discovery now that this trial's over. They were waiting for that, but I'm interested in some of those. And so when you say it's over for Diddy, I mentioned the Diddy docket. Like everyone's like, oh, it's done and over, but I'm like, you got your work cut out for you. Um,
With the civil
with
cases, yeah.
90
Nine.
civil lawsuits.
I'm gonna try and follow them, but forgive me if I can't keep up because like end of the day, like there is just too
Well,
many
obviously there's
cases.
some that, yeah, there's too many, but the little Rod one is compelling. That's Tyrone Blackburn. That's
Um,
the attorney
how
who's
much of that
also,
is true though? That's the thing. How much of
yeah,
that is
and Tyrone
true?
he just got out of jail himself. He was arrested for
How
running
is a
server
lawyer
over.
in jail? I'm sorry. You're so like you lose your license for going to prison. Like I'm surprised that he was actually in jail.
Yeah. So, we have that one that might be compelling. There's a couple ones in there that, I might follow. And I love the Diddy docket has that website where it's like super easy to follow. You have all and that's another thing is like a lot of people weren't reading the docketed stuff. Like all the tea was in the docket. Y'all missed it. So if y'all want to go back for people who like to read, like go back into older cases, there was a whole thing about one of his phones and like the way the assistant found it, and there was tons of tea in the docket.
Mm.
And Inner City Press had a fight for stuff to be docketed, and then at the very end, they finally docketed all the stuff he was asking to get docketed in the case. But yeah, you see a lot of tidbits if you're into like legal stuff and like to read like the lawyers going back and forth how like the behind the scenes was working. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, yeah, we will like if we will definitely keep up to date with the
Sentencing.
with the sentencing, and definitely with the civil cases, because especially I personally wanna look at how the Ashley Parnham legal, that civil case. I wanna be, because her one sounds the most credible in my opinion. It was very
Hmm.
detailed. It had so many people that could be brought in to testify from subpoena that you would think were not there. Like sorry, so many people that were accused that were actually named. Like Christina, all of that. If memory
KK.
serves, he mentioned a film producer or something like that that was that had drugs in the baby oil, and there were just so many details that I'm like, this is definitely gonna go to this
But
is
that's what I
definitely
thought that the
gonna go
baby oil
forward.
stuff was gonna be about, but then it never. Then did they test the baby oil? I don't know. They still have all them things of baby oil.
I'm
Should they be
surprised.
testing?
Like they're
I don't
like,
know.
I'm really surprised. I'm like I said, I'm really surprised that they put on such a case for the baby oil, and it just wasn't. There was no expert witnesses to try and testify.
The thing with the baby oil and the Astroglide, the only reason why all those came into play was because it was, to prove the interstate commerce, because the baby oil was, that it affected interstate commerce because the baby oil was made in New Jersey and all that stuff. So yeah, but I know we got to wrap up here. We could talk for days, but I appreciate you, Heinz, on the baby oil note. Let's Astroglide out of here.
Look, look, it like I will confess, like this case has got me thinking, like, did I make the wrong choice by not trying to engage in a free coffee in my life? Like, am I prude? It's like I don't know what's funny. Like I mean, the way that they were describing it in court, etc., they made it sound fun. Like the way Cassie was describing it, the way Mia was no, not Mia. Jane was describing the freak off. They made it sound like it was something that you just can't miss. And I'm like, am I doing something wrong? But like, but yeah, like anyway, I'm glad that I'm personally glad that he
Well,
wasn't.
Cassie did say like she didn't have like, because I was like, what testimony you listening to? Because Cassie didn't make it out like it was a good time or
No,
anything.
no,
But
she did the final freak off. Come
I
on.
think it was just also like Diddy wasn't a mind reader, because like if they were so uncomfortable, they also like would send him texts like, I love doing that. And it was like, well, if you were telling him that, how was he to know that you were telling him because of fear? Like, that was the weird part to me. It
No,
was
no,
like, how did he know that you
like
were lying to him? Like, that was, you were
I'm
lying.
sorry.
So
I'm sorry. Like when I saw that she left her boyfriend and then she was suggesting a final freak off, like to me that was just a nail in the coffin for me, because there's no way you can ask for a final freak off and you are afraid of this guy after you've left his grasp. Like to me,
yeah.
that was always unreconcilable for me, which is why I thought that she really that she really did enjoy some parts of it. I'm not saying that she enjoyed all of it. I'm not saying that, but you can argue that a majority of it that she started to miss it and she wanted to do it again. That's what I
I
saw.
don't think that it
You
was
know,
that she started to miss it. I think with both of them, it was that they didn't want like him to be doing it with anybody else, and they really did love him, and so they wanted to make him happy. So whenever he was like not calling them or like not as like present with them, they'd be like kind of dangling that like, hey, do you want to go do an FO? Because they knew that was his kryptonite. So that's what I got out of it. That especially with Jane's testimony, because she'd be like, well, Gina, da da da, like. um I felt like, she was, and she even said, like, I did it because I loved him and I wanted him to
mm,
love me and, to make him happy and all this other stuff. So I feel like when they were initiating it, it was more like to like get attention from him, which now I know that that is a form of coercion. Not a lot of people know. And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
the
yeah.
defense should have, I know that they weren't allowed to use coercive control language with Dr. Don,
Mm,
but the defense should have found some way to connect the fact that withholding love from someone is considered coercion,
They should.
and they did
I
it. So
I personally, and we'll close out on this. I personally think that they should have tested that baby oil, especially based on the testimony, especially based on the civil complaints of the other alleged victims that came forward. I think they should have done. They should have done a test. Got the person that did the test to come and testify. Yeah, that he did put drugs in the baby oil, and that would be used to excite, or because that's textbook trafficking. You can't do that. You using the drugs to induce your victims to carry out. That meets the first two thresholds easily. Like,
yep,
yeah, so I'm really surprised that they didn't go that far to at least try to show, well, is it possible that he could have been using drugs in this baby oil, and or bringing the person that made the allegation to come in as a fact witness. Lay
yeah.
witness, something like that. But anyway.
Yeah, and they can't go back and try it again, because
Yeah,
that's the
they can't.
worst part
It's
about
done.
being
It's
a lawyer
done.
is like the aftermath, what could have, should have done. But I appreciate you, Hines, and
Yeah.
thank you, chat,
No
for
worries.
being
Thank
so
you, chat.
active.
Thank you, chat. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I will see you on the next video. I've got a lot of videos coming out on the channel in regards to the legal cases that we've been covering. All we do is recaps on this channel. You can catch up with us with legal cases. But yeah, more streams are coming, more videos are coming, and yeah,
Yeah, you can
make
catch
sure that you
mine.
go. Yeah, I was
I'm
about to
a
start
C
saying,
journalist,
yeah,
24 on all platforms,
yeah.
and you can follow me there.
Her video, her channel link is in the description. Make sure you go check it out. And yeah, she does amazing coverage with
Thanks so
amazing
much.
guests. Yeah, you can go
Thank you.
find her on her channel. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and CJ, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. Have a great evening or day wherever you're at. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Catch Up Court podcast. Don't forget to like this video, share this video, and subscribe for more legal cases that we cover on this channel. We do nothing but cover legal cases and true crime on here. You can also check out our playlist that we have of all of our content. They're all available in the playlist option. Make sure you go check that out. So make sure that you hurry back and catch up with us. See you on the next one. Bye for now.